Why is fun more important than balance in games in general, but also in Guild Wars 2, of course? This is a question I want to debate today. As always, let me know your takes in the comments down below. And now just grab a cup of tea and relax. Special shout out as always to all my generous channel members and supporters. Thanks a lot for your support. And now, without much further ado, let's jump straight in. Balancing in games is obviously a thing that is very big, a very highly hot topic, very high debated topic. And I personally think you can't get it perfectly right as a developer. I think there's always someone that's offended by their balancing decisions and stuff. So I think I will give my take, my subjective take here. And that doesn't mean it's like the absolute truth as always. It's just my subjective take on the matter. But I think a lot of people would agree with me. I think it's not a very hot thing here to say. I think balancing in games should be, especially in competitive games, so PvP, World versus World in Guild Wars 2 for example, should be somewhat balanced in that sense that you have everything is somewhat on a similar level. At least the high level builds are somewhat close together. You don't want to have one build, one thing that is absolutely broken and everyone has to play it, otherwise you will get demolished. I think that's not good. That much I would say everyone agrees on. There might be some exceptions, so sometimes it's not good to have specific builds to be really good and other builds being bad. But I think there might be a exception to that rule. Sometimes you want to have a specific build not being good. Why is that? Because I think sometimes, especially in competitive games, a build that is not good but very annoying to fight against should also never be good, because if it's very good and annoying to fight against, I think the fun that the opponents have is very low, and you don't want to have that. You want to have your game being fun, and that's only the case if you have really fun to play builds in both directions, so the ones that you play but also the ones that you fight. So I personally think this is also something that developers have to consider regarding balancing. I also think balancing in PvE, so where you don't really fight against other opponents, is not as strictly necessary as in other competitive games. I think balancing in PvE should be like every class should be viable, but I think it's not like if there's one broken thing, that doesn't mean you can't play the others. I think it might be, the most optimal thing to go for the broken one, but I think it's not as strict as for competitive games, I would say, like PvP World versus World focused games. I think it's more important that you have fun in those game modes as well. So if every build is viable and you can play every build, then I don't really care if someone else plays a broken build because I'm not competing against them in that sense. This is just my take, of course. Let's get now a little bit deeper in that. But before we do that, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. That would help out the channel quite a bit. Thanks. But now let's talk about why I want to talk about this now. Because of course, this is like always the case, has been since the beginning of games in general. Yes, but why do I want to talk about it now? So we got a recent balance patch that was really interesting in terms of what Guild Wars 2, how Guild Wars 2 changed, because I would say you could count the amount of nerfs that we got with the balance patch on 1 to 2 hands. It's really, really small amount of nerfs where you get like 100 or even more changes that are actually buffing stuff that is underused or reworking stuff that is actually used or buffing even stuff that is used. So I think it's very interesting that the developers decided to buff a lot of stuff while not nerfing a lot of stuff. I think nerfing always feels bad for the stuff that gets nerfed. Yes, some people will agree that it's good to nerf stuff that is overperforming, sure, but it feels always better to buff stuff. Getting your build buffed is always a way better feeling than getting it nerfed, I would say. So in the end, I think I have to talk about this topic now, because I think it is more important that the balancing team of Guild Wars 2 in specific focuses more on balancing the game in a way that it is not perfectly balanced, everything feels exactly the same, there is no outlier in either direction. I think it's more important that they focus on the fun, so that you buff builds that are not used because they are not fun to play, they are gimmicky, sometimes even builds that are just bad. Of course, those should also get buffed, but I think at a certain point, it's more important that you make changes that make a new playstyle possible, that make it more fun to play this class, this build specific, make it even possible, like Heal Alacrity Mirage, something like that. I think this is insane, in my opinion. As a developer, if you make more reworks, like in this recent balance patch, I'm all for it, making more reworks like that. Obviously, it's not always good if the rework is changing things that you liked before, but I think underused stuff that gets reworked is really nice. I think everyone would agree to that, because then the rework is possibly better than before and more interesting and more fun. That's at least my opinion. What else do we have? Why is it important to talk about it now? Because the new expansion, in my opinion, should also bring something to the table that makes it not only worth buying for the customer, we, the players, but it should also be something that is also changing the game in a more fun way. I don't want to have something that is added to the game that is like, yeah, technically it's something new, but why would I care if it's not really fun to interact with? So I think if you bring out something with an expansion, that might be a really hot take, that is like completely finely balanced and is really not affecting the game too much. It only gets bought because it's something new. I think it's way better if you make something that is new and very fun, that people want to get because it's really fun, it's really cool to try out new things. So what I'm advocating here is that I think the beginning of an expansion especially, we want to have something that is really crazy. Sometimes it's even broken in competitive modes in PvP. In even PvE, a lot of stuff is really broken when it comes out. And I think that's good. I want to have that. That's why I think the new expansion should have elite specs, in my opinion, to really confirm that this is like people want to play it, get something fun. I don't care if the balance because of that gets skewed quite hard, especially in PvE. No one cares really about balance in PvE. At least if it's fun, it's fun. You know, you don't care if there's a broken Chronomancer healer right now. You can also play a Druid, you can play a Firebrand, you can even play a Heal Harbinger. It doesn't matter. You can play everything in PvE. Yes, there might be something that is even more broken than the build that you are using, but I think that's not really changing too much. I think balance is not as much important anymore in Guild Wars 2 as it is fun. Fun is way more important. Fun above all else. That's my whole statement here. I really think this is the case, and we really have to advocate, and I really hope that the ArenaNet, especially the balance developer, continue with those reworks and just fun new playstyles without caring too much about if it's absolutely broken or if it's completely finely balanced. That's my take. I personally think they are actually accepting that at this current state now as well. I think there's so many elite specs, so many weapons, so many just in general trade synergies, interactions in the game, that Guild Wars 2 right now is already quite hard to balance. And I think bringing out new stuff like elite specs and build crafting, theory crafting feature in the next expansion, it doesn't matter. It will probably break the game and the balance in a way that is worse than before, if you just think about the balance perspective. And I think that's okay if it is fun. If it's not fun, I think we have a big problem, because then the balance is shit and the fun is not there. That's not good. Of course, I hope that will be fun and somewhat balanced, but I would be really completely fine if it's fun and the balance is like skewed. That is very likely to happen, and I really hope that the new elite specs or whatever we get is absolutely fun. And as always, let me know your takes on this hot topic in the comments down below. I think there are many ways to see that, but I think fun is the most important thing in gaming in general. You play the game after all for fun. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks again to all my supporters, and I hope to see you all in the next video.